just you and
All right, we've seen virtualization as a risk come up over and over again. So now we're finally going to talk about more in depth the risks to virtualization. Virtualization is such an important topic because it's one of the main benefits of the cloud that we're able to create all these virtual environments. In this lesson, we're going to talk about the benefits of virtualization, the types of hypervisors which are used to provision virtual environments, and the threats to virtualization. Okay, virtualization is really the ability to provision and create virtual environments that individual customers and their applications can run on. That is done through using what's referred to as a hypervisor. There are two types of hypervisors. Type 1 hypervisors run directly on system hardware. That's why they're often referred to as bare metal. And Type 1 hypervisors include Windows Hyper-V and Linux's kernel virtual machine, often referred to as KVM. In a Type 1 hypervisor, there are a number of guest operating systems that are run on the hypervisor that are relevant to each individual virtual machine. No guest operating system has more power than any of the others, and the hypervisor is really used to create and manage all these guest operating systems. In a Type 2 hypervisor, the virtual machines are running on top of a host operating system. And examples of Type 2 hypervisors include VMware Workstation and Oracle VirtualBox. So the primary host OS has more power in this instance than those individual guest operating systems. Okay, let's talk about some of the threats. Type 2 hypervisors have a larger attack surface, so they're innately more vulnerable to threats. The attacker could really attack the hypervisor itself, the underlying operating system, and the machine. And this also, the reliance on the host operating system often also increases the likelihood that malicious code can be propagated because of the reliance on these shared services. In the Type 1 hypervisor, the attack is really limited to the hypervisor and the machine because all those other individual things are beneath the hypervisor, being provisioned by the hypervisor. Okay, let's talk about some specific type of risks that can occur. We're going to talk about guest escapes and host escapes. Both these are a little rare because they rely on the failure of other controls. Guest escapes, it's when a user is allowed to leave their virtual machine and interact with either the hypervisor, which can be used to provision other resources, or they may be able to interact with other virtual machines. And this is bad because they can potentially edit, view, manipulate, or copy the data that's on another virtual machine. Now, if you think back to our use of software as a service or platform as a service, you can see how that might enable one customer to get access to another customer's data or instances. Definitely not a good thing. Host escape, it takes this escape threat to a whole new level where the user could potentially leave the host machine and access devices on the network. But this is really unlikely because that would reflect a failure in multiple controls. Controls really at the hardware, software, and policy level that would prevent it would enable a failure in isolation to occur. One of the other last thoughts we're going to talk about is information bleed. Now, information bleed really is how an attacker may glean useful information based on malfunctions or failures on a virtual machine. When an application fails, it reveals a little information about what that application actually is. And an attacker might be able to infer, based on the failures and malfunctions, what is actually running on a virtual machine without having access to it. They could then use this information to narrow down which attacks they may actually try to use to actually infiltrate or exploit the machine based on the information, because they now know, oh, this operating system's running or this application is running. Oh, here are some known vulnerabilities I can try. In all these instances, it's very important to ensure that patching is done on the hypervisor to prevent these exploits and ensure There are no failures in isolation when using hypervisors and virtualization. All right, let's do a quiz question. What type of hypervisor would you choose to minimize the attack surface? Type 3, Type 2, or Type 1? If you said Type 1, you're right. Type 3 isn't a type of hypervisor. Type 2, it has that shared host operating system as well as the hypervisor itself, as well as the machine that it's all running on. So there are really 3 different components to attack. We're in the Type 1 hypervisor. There's only the hypervisor itself and the machine that it's running on. All right, in summary, we talked about the types of hypervisors, and we also talked about the risks when using virtualization, including guest escapes, host escapes, information bleed, the attack surface of various hypervisors as well. All right, I'll see you in the next lesson.